When we think of leadership, we are often drawn to the image of the powerful speaker, the one who commands attention, who inspires with words, who moves crowds with the strength of a vision articulated aloud. But if we look more closely, if we listen more carefully to the deeper currents of human connection, we discover that leadership is not truly built by speaking alone. It is built and broken by the quality of our listening. Listening is not the absence of speaking. It is an act of creation. It is the quiet weaving of connection between souls, the silent honoring of another's reality, the invisible architecture upon which trust, loyalty, and collaboration are built. When a leader listens, truly listens, something extraordinary happens. They cross the boundary between hierarchy and humanity. They say, without needing words, "You are not a tool to achieve my goals. You are a person worthy of attention, worthy of presence, worthy of being fully heard." Active listening is the bridge between presence and influence. It transforms communication from a transactional exchange of information into a relational experience of recognition. It is the difference between hearing the noise of words and receiving the meaning of a human life speaking itself into the world. True listening is not passive. It is fierce. It demands that we set aside, even for a moment, our agendas, our assumptions, our urgency to respond. It demands that we enter the sacred uncertainty of allowing ourselves to be changed, even slightly, by what we encounter in the voice and experience of another. Leadership built on speaking alone can inspire briefly, can command obedience for a time. But leadership built on deep listening inspires trust that endures, that deepens, that holds fast when inspiration fades and difficulties arise. Because when people feel heard, they feel seen. When they feel seen, they feel valued. And when they feel valued, they will walk with you not out of obligation, but out of shared purpose and authentic commitment. Listening, real listening, is not a soft skill. It is the beating heart of leadership itself. In this lesson, we will explore what active listening truly means, why it is psychologically powerful, how it can be practiced at the highest level of leadership, what barriers stand in its way, and how it can become not just something you do, but a way you lead, a way you are. Because to lead is not merely to speak. It is to create the spaces where others can speak and to have the courage, the humility, the humanity to truly listen. It is one of the most dangerous illusions in leadership, the belief that hearing sounds, catching words, is the same as listening. But true listening, the kind that transforms relationships and builds unbreakable trust, is something far rarer, far deeper. It is not merely the mechanical reception of language. It is the full-bodied, full-hearted act of receiving another human being in their meaning, in their intention, in their unspoken hopes and fears. Active listening means being present, fully and without distraction. It means that when someone speaks, you are not preparing a response in parallel. You are not multitasking in your mind. You are not fitting their words into the narrow corridors of your assumptions or quickly scanning for flaws to rebut. You are there, in the silence between their words, in the emotions underneath their sentences, in the breathing spaces where their real meaning often hides. To listen actively is to offer the rare gift of your whole attention. And this gift is felt, instantly and unmistakably, even if no word is spoken about it. There is something deeply human in the recognition. This person is not just hearing me. They are here with me. Active listening is also the willingness to allow oneself to be changed. It does not mean surrendering judgment or abandoning discernment. But it means entering the conversation without the arrogant certainty that you already know everything worth knowing. It means carrying the quiet humility that every person, no matter how junior, no matter how different from you, holds a piece of reality that you cannot fully see on your own. It requires emotional attunement, sensing the feeling behind the facts, reading the currents beneath the surface of polished narratives. Because often, what is most important is not said directly. It is carried in a hesitation, a tone, a choice of words that reveals vulnerability or fear or hope. To listen actively is to listen not only to what is loud, but to what is soft, to what is struggling to be spoken. And perhaps most challenging, active listening demands that we set aside the urgent desire to fix, to solve, to jump to action. There is a time for solutions. But there must first be a time for hearing, for witnessing, for simply allowing the other to fully exist before we rush to intervene. In a world that moves faster every day, in organizations obsessed with efficiency and outcomes, active listening is a radical act. It slows down the frantic momentum. It recenters leadership in presence rather than performance. It builds the soil in which sustainable success, not just short term achievement, can take root and grow. To listen actively is to lead differently, not by overpowering, but by inviting, not by dominating, but by making space, not by controlling the narrative, but by allowing the truth, the full, complicated human truth, to emerge and be honored. This is what active listening really means. And this is why it is one of the most powerful and most difficult practices a leader can embrace. If we wish to understand why active listening wields such transformative power in leadership, we must look not merely at communication theories, but at the deeper architecture of the human psyche. Because being heard is not a trivial experience. It is one of the most fundamental human needs, woven into our biology, into our emotional wiring, into the very way we make sense of ourselves in the world. To feel heard is to feel validated. Not necessarily agreed with, not necessarily praised, but seen, acknowledged, recognized in one's existence. And this validation touches something ancient within us, the need to belong, to matter, to know that our voice carries weight in the relational fabric of our lives. When a person feels truly heard, something relaxes inside them. The defensive walls they have learned to erect through countless disappointments soften, even if only slightly. The urgency to prove, to defend, to control diminishes. There is a natural opening, a willingness to reflect, to collaborate, to engage more fully. And this shift is not subtle in its impact. It is profound. People who feel heard are more willing to share their real thoughts, their real concerns, their real aspirations, not just the sanitized, strategic versions designed to survive power dynamics. They are more willing to innovate, to take risks, to commit deeply, because the relational ground beneath them feels stable enough to hold the weight of their full participation. On the contrary, when people do not feel heard, when their contributions are brushed aside, when their concerns are met with perfunctory nods or strategic politeness, something essential begins to wither. They may continue to comply outwardly. They may continue to attend meetings, to meet deadlines. But inwardly, a quiet disengagement begins. A retreat of passion, of ownership, of the willingness to bring the full richness of their mind and heart to the work. Listening, then, is not a courtesy. It is a catalyst. It is the condition under which human beings can flourish, not only individually but collectively. Leadership built on speaking alone may drive short-term results. But leadership built on listening awakens the full intelligence, the full creativity, the full commitment of those who follow. And this is why active listening is not simply an interpersonal skill. It is a strategic imperative. Because in a world of complexity, ambiguity, and rapid change, no single mind, no matter how brilliant, can see the whole picture. Only by listening deeply, consistently, courageously, can a leader tap into the distributed wisdom that already exists around them, waiting to be invited forward. To make others feel heard is not to lose control. It is to create the conditions for the kind of collective brilliance that no amount of top-down control could ever achieve. And it begins always in the quiet, revolutionary act of listening. If active listening is a leadership superpower, then we must ask ourselves how it is cultivated, not as an abstract ideal, but as a living practice shaped moment by moment in the real conversations of our daily leadership. Because listening deeply is not simply about good intentions. It is about disciplined attention, about embodied habits, about choices made and remade until listening becomes not an act we perform, but a way we inhabit the world. The first and most essential practice is the full offering of attention, not partial attention, not the fractured, distracted attention that glances at a screen while someone speaks, that nods automatically while planning the next meeting. True listening requires the radical decision to be fully here, eyes present, body open, mind uncluttered by internal narratives or parallel agendas. When you offer someone your undivided attention, you tell them something more powerful than any compliment. You matter enough for me to set everything else aside. You matter enough to be the sole focus of my awareness right now. This attention is not sterile. It is emotionally attuned. It is alive to not only the words being spoken, but to the emotional landscapes beneath them, the hesitations, the tonal shifts, the moments of swelling energy or sudden withdrawal that reveal where the true meaning lies. From this presence arises the practice of reflection and paraphrasing. To reflect back what you have heard, in your own words, without judgment, without rushing to interpret, is to offer a mirror in which the speaker can see themselves more clearly. Sometimes it is in hearing their own thoughts reflected back that people discover what they truly mean. Sometimes it is in feeling genuinely received that people dare to reveal more, to go deeper, to risk truth. Reflecting is not parroting. It is not mechanical repetition. It is a living process of attunement. This is what I'm hearing. Is this what you mean? Such moments of reflection do not slow the conversation. They deepen it. They ensure that understanding grows layer by layer, not by assumption, but by verification. And perhaps most profoundly, active listening demands that we listen not only for facts, but for emotions. Facts live on the surface of language. Emotions live beneath it, shaping the meaning, driving the urgency, coloring the landscape in which decisions must be made. To listen for emotions is to ask silently, what is the feeling moving through these words? What is the need trying to find expression here? It is to listen with your whole being, your mind sharp, your heart open, your nervous system tuned not just to what is rationally stated, but to what is humanly alive. These skills, full attention, reflective mirroring, emotional attunement, are not techniques to be applied mechanically. They are doorways into a deeper way of being with others. A way that honors not only efficiency but dignity, not only productivity but humanity. And in the practice of these skills, repeated and refined over time, you do not simply become a better listener. You become a different kind of leader. One who builds trust without demanding it. One who unlocks wisdom without forcing it. One who leads not by dominating conversations, but by nurturing the spaces where real conversations can finally happen. If active listening is so powerful, if it is so foundational to trust, engagement, and genuine leadership, then why is it so rare? Why, in so many meetings, in so many crucial conversations, does real listening feel like a precious exception rather than the norm? The answer lies not in a lack of knowledge, but in the invisible barriers that silently shape the way we engage with others. The first barrier is distraction, both external and internal. In a world saturated with information, devices, deadlines, and competing demands, our attention has become a fragmented, fragile thing. Even when we intend to listen, our minds are often elsewhere, tugged by the gravitational pull of unfinished tasks, pending decisions, personal worries. We sit across from someone who is sharing something real, but half of our mind is scrolling through unseen to-do lists, rehearsing future conversations, spinning in anxieties we can barely name. And so, though we may nod, though we may catch words, we miss the human being speaking behind them. We hear, but we do not receive. The second barrier is bias, the subtle, often unconscious filters through which we hear only what fits our expectations, our judgments, our pre-existing narratives. When bias governs our listening, we are not truly encountering the other. We are encountering our story about the other. We listen selectively, affirming what confirms our views, disregarding or misinterpreting what challenges them. Leadership that listens through bias cannot build real trust. Because people sense, sometimes instantly, when they are being heard not as they are, but as a stereotype, a role, a category. True listening demands the courage to let go of pre-written scripts and meet each person, each moment, as alive and unpredictable. The third barrier is emotional reactivity. When something the other person says triggers our own fear, anger, defensiveness, or sadness, the delicate inner space needed for real listening collapses. We shift from open presence into self-protection. We listen no longer to understand, but to defend, to counter, to survive the discomfort we feel. And this shift often happens so fast, so unconsciously, that we do not even notice it. We believe we are listening, but inwardly we are preparing our rebuttal, armoring our vulnerability, rehearsing the case for our own rightness. To overcome these barriers, distraction, bias, emotional reactivity is not easy. It requires practice, humility, and above all, a deep decision. A decision to lead not from the narrow fortress of self, but from the open landscape of presence. It means cultivating the discipline to set aside devices, agendas, and internal chatter. It means challenging our own assumptions about who someone is and what they mean. It means noticing, with compassion, when we are triggered and choosing, again and again, to return to listening rather than retreating into defense. Active listening is not fragile. It is fierce. It demands that we wrestle with ourselves, not just with external distractions, but with the deeper forces that would rather keep us safe than connected. And it is in that wrestling, in that conscious choosing of presence over protection, that we grow. Not only as listeners, but as leaders, and as human beings capable of truly meeting the lives entrusted to our care. When we speak of presence in leadership, we are not speaking of charisma alone, nor of the ability to capture attention through force of personality. True presence is quieter, deeper, more enduring. It is the quality of being fully here, unfragmented, undistracted, undivided, in such a way that others feel safer, more real, more seen simply by being in your orbit. And there is no greater act of presence than true listening. Listening is not merely the passive reception of sound. It is the active creation of a relational field, a space in which the full humanity of another is invited to emerge, where truth feels not only possible but welcome, where the masks so often worn in organizational life can, even briefly, be set down. When a leader listens fully, they create psychological safety without having to declare it. It is felt in the relaxed shoulders of the team member who realizes they do not have to defend their every word. It is felt in the bolder voice of the colleague who risks sharing an unpolished idea, trusting that exploration will be honored over judgment. It is felt in the rising currents of creativity, of honesty, of collaboration that flow when people are no longer guarded against the fear of being unseen or unheard. Listening, practiced deeply and consistently, becomes a magnetic force. It draws forth the best thinking, the deeper concerns, the hidden hopes of those you lead. It accelerates resolution of conflict not by imposing answers, but by making space for real understanding to surface. It strengthens engagement not by manufacturing motivation, but by recognizing and nurturing the intrinsic voice within each individual. And most profoundly, listening as presence transforms the very culture you inhabit. It shifts the atmosphere from one of guarded compliance to one of authentic participation. It makes leadership not a performance to be maintained, but a relationship to be honored. To listen is not to relinquish leadership. It is to embody leadership at its highest level. Not leadership through control, but leadership through connection. Not leadership through noise, but leadership through the powerful, disciplined quiet that calls others into their own fullness. When listening becomes not something you do occasionally, but a way of being, your leadership ceases to depend on titles or structures alone. It begins to move from within, influencing not because it demands, but because it resonates, because it creates a space where others are invited, not compelled, to bring the best of themselves. And in such a space, transformation becomes not only possible, but inevitable.